And if I can have a member certify closed session for me, please.
Mr. Chair, I certify that to the best of each member's knowledge, the Williamsburg-James City County School Board, while in closed session, discussed only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements as stated in Virginia law, and that only such public matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered.
Thank you, Ms. Ortego. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Hundley. Any discussion on that? Don't typically. Thank you. Ms. Zoller?
Mrs. Ortego.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Ms. Cook.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hundley.
Aye.
Dr. Beer, excuse me, he's not here. Mr. Dell.
Aye. And Dr. Beers will be back. He had to run home to take care of something. He'll be back for this meeting. Thank you, Ms. Zoller. If I can have a member approve the agenda. And before we do that, I wanted to notate for the listening public and those in the hall that earlier today we did add to our agenda an action item 8.0, excuse me, where are we?
Two.
Okay, it moved up, 8.02. I think it was earlier. It's 8.02, approval of deadline extension for appeal of personnel investigation. This is a time-sensitive matter, and not to go into great detail on this personnel matter, but the school board is required to address this matter within 30 days, and we won't be meeting until that time, and so we've got some clarification on how we can proceed by our attorney, and so we're going to take action on that this evening. That'll be 8.02. So if I can have a member approve the agenda as presented this evening.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Hundley. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Ortego. Any discussion? And Ms. Zoller?
Mrs. Hundley.
Aye.
Mrs. Ortego.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Ms. Cook.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mr. Dell.
Aye. Let's go into item 4.1, announcements and superintendent's report. Dr. Heron?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the first time in WJCC schools history, all three of our high school theatre companies competed at the 2022-23 VHSL State Theatre Festival. Jamestown and Warhill represented us in Class 4 and placed 3rd and 4th, respectively, and Lafayette competed in Class 3 and earned 2nd place. Congratulations to the cast, crew, and directors of each of these one-act plays. We look forward to recognizing everyone involved at a future school board meeting. For nearly 10 years, the WJCC Schools Family Academy program has provided families with information and resources to support student learning and development. Future sessions may be hosted virtually or in person, depending on the topic and the level of interactivity required by the presenters. Please visit wjccschools.org/engage to share ideas and suggestions of topics for a future Family Academy. And finally, as we move closer to winter break, I wish all families, staff, and the WJCC Schools community a happy and healthy holiday season. Schools and offices will be closed to the public from December 19th through January 2nd. We look forward to seeing students and staff back again on Tuesday, January the 3rd. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Heron. Any board member reports this evening? Ms. Ortego?
Yeah, I attended the 21st Century and Career Ready Committee meeting last week, and it's just lots of exciting things in the works being planned for the springtime. The mock interview session and career fairs and lots of different ideas, but there's a lot going on, and there will be some announcements pending. So,
thank you. Ms. Ortego? Yeah, Ms. Hummel.
I am on the board of the WJCC Schools Foundation, and I just wanted to report on a super fun event that happened on Sunday night, and it was the Williamsburg Christmas Parade, and we had all of the mascots from all of our schools participating in the parade right in front of the Jamestown High School Band, which was awesome, and provided all the music that we needed for our marching purposes. We had a great time, and hopefully we handed out how many hundreds and hundreds of pencils that had the Williamsburg James City County School Foundation logo on it, so people would kind of build awareness of what the foundation does and how it supports teaching innovation. So thanks. Just wanted to report on that. And our superintendent was marching right along with the mascots.
Thank you, Ms. Hummel. I so disappointed that I've missed. I think it's Lafayette's production of "It's a Wonderful Life." Is that right?
Jamestown.
It was at Jamestown. Okay, because I knew a student that was in it. Must have transferred from Lafayette. But I've heard a lot of great things about that production. Really looking forward to this season and seeing some of these productions. It's going to be great. All right, we'll move on to our public comments of the evening, and thank you, Ms. Hummel, for stepping in here.
Sure. It is at this point in our meeting where citizens are invited to address the board. Those citizens desiring to speak have submitted speaker cards to the clerk prior to the start of tonight's meeting. These speakers are asked to come to the podium when their names are called, state their names for the record, and direct their comments to the chair of the board. It is in the board's interest and desire that all comments are heard and respected. Hence, citizens are asked not to engage in applauding, verbal outbursts, or any other type of demonstrations during the presentations. Personnel matters are not considered in public meetings. Therefore, the board requests that all speakers refrain from making reference to specific individuals in any form or fashion. Though the board does not respond to your comments are heard and appreciated. Each speaker is allocated 1 minute and 30 seconds to make their presentation, and the board asks that you respect this time limitation. Also, please be reminded that no time may be yielded to another speaker. Your acceptance and adherence to these guidelines will be greatly appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and my directions are concluded.
Thank you, Ms. Hummel.
The first card that we have is for Marco Sardi.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and Dr. Herron. My name is Marco Sardi, the Vice President of WJCEA and a teacher next door at James Blair Middle School. I wanted to express my thanks for the support the board showed for our rally last month, and second, my own appreciation for a specific member of the board who shall remain nameless in her service to the community these past several years, and I speak for the executive team when I say we wish her well. I would also like to encourage our leadership to attend the Board of Supervisors meeting on December 13th, as WJCEA and several community groups will be showing up to support a 10% raise for staff for next school year. I know this is one of the several important steps we can take as a group to ensure the building and continual success of WJCC. In that regard, I ask you each to consider the following. WJCC was at one time, one of the top paying districts in Hampton Roads. Teachers were excited to be selected for a position in this very prestigious district. Now, New Kent and Gloucester are more competitive in several areas, and teachers are speaking with their resignations. I urge you to stand with us as we work to find a solution with the Board of Supervisors and City Council and yourselves, as we work towards maintaining WJCC's prestigious status. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sardi.
Next, our speaker is Alan Parham.
Hello. Good evening, Chairman Dow, esteemed members of the board, and Dr. Herron. My name is Alin Parham, a social studies teacher here in WJCC and the current president of the Williamsburg-James City Education Association, advocating for our members in WJCC. On behalf of the executive board, I would like to say thank you to Ms. Cook for many years of public service as an appointed member of the school board for the city of Williamsburg. Throughout her many years, I believe 8, as a division leader, she has been an advocate for our students, employees, community members, along with funding for our public school system in WJCC. As a token of our appreciation, we leave you with a few goodies and a Red for Ed item that you may wear to symbolize your support for strong public schools and communities. Since our last rally at the school board meeting, we listened to the board member comments, appreciating our professionalism and our message of increasing staff salary. And so we will be advocating to our funding partners at the next Board of Supervisors meeting, as we know that James City County provides 90% of the funding and the city of Williamsburg covers about 10%. As my vice president stated earlier, we encourage our division leaders to attend with us and wear red for ed as we advocate the necessity of funding, as the budgets presented from our school division do reflect the needs of WJCC. Needs that not only impact the capital and operations in our building, but our salary and work environments that are our student learning environments. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Parham. That's it. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Hummel. And thank you to our speakers. And let's move on to item 6, our information discussion items, audit report for the year ending June 30th, 2022. Dr. Herron?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This evening, Ms. Ewan's going to introduce our special guest speaker, providing the independent auditor's report for fiscal year ended June 30th. Ms. Ewan.
Thank you, Dr. Herron. Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Annually, we are required to have an audit of our financial records performed by an external audit firm. This evening, Ms. Leslie Roberts, partner with Brown Edwards, is here to share with you the results of our audit for the year ended June 30th, 2022.
Okay, is this on? Okay. Good evening. I just want to go over things at a pretty high level. This is what I've done in the past. I don't know if you guys all have access to the audited financials, but that's what I'm going to talk about first. In general, the audit went very smoothly this year. There was a new GASB that needed to be implemented this year related to leases. I don't know if you've heard much about it, but basically any lease that is a long-term lease over a 12-month period has to be put on your statement of net position now. So you've got a right to use asset and a lease liability, and any lease that you lease as the leaseor, the opposite has to happen. You have to record it on the statement of net position as well. So we worked through that, and we did that kind of collaboratively and assisted management. We have some software that kind of spits that out once you get the terms of the leases. And so that was really the biggest thing this year. But everything went smoothly. Renee and her team were ready and prepared for the audit, and they were available throughout the audit. So again, just going to go through a few things in the audited financials. Page 12 is the independent auditor's report, and this is the bottom line. This is what you pay us to come in and do. Are we able to come in as a third party, unrelated to the school, and look at your financials and say they present fairly the results of your operations and your balances at the end of the year. And if you look at the second paragraph on page 11, I was going to say page 12, page 11, that's our opinion paragraph, and this is, again, a clean, unmodified opinion. So, yes, we were able to come in, look at the school board's records, and say that they present fairly the operations and the results of the operations and the balances at the end of the year. You'll notice the fourth paragraph down, it highlights the change in accounting principle and talks about this lease implementation. It affected several notes, note 4, 5, note 1, 4, 5, and 6. So it's kind of pervasive throughout your financials. Moving on to page 14 is the management's discussion and analysis. And this goes from page 14 to page 22. And this is a good high-level overview of how the financials are put together, and it gives some comparative analytical information, like why things changed year over year and so forth. So this is a good piece of information, and it's written in a way that's easier to understand than the basic financials.
Thank you.
But moving to the basic financials, on page 25, Exhibit 1, is your statement of net position. And this is like your balance sheet. You've got your assets and deferred outflows, liabilities, deferred inflows, and what's left over in the case of a governmental entity is net position. And you can see that you've got some new stuff on there. If you go down several items in the assets, you can see that you've got a lease receivable, current and non-current. You didn't have that last year. And then if you move down into the liabilities, you can see that you have an intangible right to use lease liability. And you can also see you have a deferred lease receivable. that you didn't have before. So like I said, pretty pervasive throughout your financials. Moving on to the next page, just pointing out some things that changed a little bit. In the prior year, you had your grants and contributions increased pretty substantially this year, to about 141 million. A lot of that is COVID and related money that came in. That's up even from the prior year, which was pretty high too, at 129 million. So you can see your change in that position was to the positive of about 19 million, that 18,676, 515. So a good year. Again, I think you're going to have a presentation about how you're going to use all that money and try to use all that money, but a lot of assistance coming in this year. Moving on to past the basic financials, the notes to the financials start on page 30 and go on for several pages. Again, I'm just going to point out some things within the notes. The notes basically give information about how your financials are put together, what your policies are, and give a deeper dive into some of the balances and transactions. I'm mainly going to focus on what changed, which in general is this lease thing. So if you look on page 38, part of note 1, section N, goes in and explains the adoption of this new accounting principle and explains how it works on both the leasee and the leaseor side. So this goes on for several pages and concludes at the top of page 40. So that's a big explanation. Like if you really want to understand exactly what went on with this lease implementation, that will explain everything. Moving on to page 43. Remember I said you've got some new things. This is this lease receivable and deferred inflows of resources. You have a tower lease, a lease for space with American Tower, and that's the details of that lease. Moving on to the next page, note 5 is your capital assets note. And this is always a big note for the school board because you've got a lot of activity, you've got a lot of money tied up in capital assets. You can see that this year is no exception. You've added some assets this year, and there's been some activity. Also, again, pointing out this lease thing. You've got right of use leased assets. You've got storage facilities, trailers, and equipment and copy machines. You can see that's both at the top section for the cost and in the bottom section for the accumulated amortization on that. And if it wasn't in enough other places, on the next page, in the long-term liabilities, this basically spells out all your long-term liabilities, which include your compensated absences, OPEB, your net pension liability, and the new thing that was added is this intangible right-to-use lease liability. That's all I had to point out in the notes. You may have any question on the basic financials or notes. I know it was riveting and very exciting.
Yeah. Ms. Hummel, Ms. Hummel, please.
Okay, so this GASB requirement, could you explain to me in like a couple sentences, like I'm a 5th grader,
Okay.
whether this is good for us, bad for us? I mean, we had to do it.
Well, I mean, if you ask the GASB, they will say it was good for you because it puts all of this information in your basic financials. But all of this information was already in your disclosures. So whether it was good or bad, I mean, I do have entities that it's affecting their debt covenants and ratios because you're grossing up your assets and liabilities. And depending on how your covenants are written, that could have some impact. I mean, my personal opinion is it didn't really do much more than a user of the financials that knew what they were looking at could glean anyway. Because all of this information was in the disclosures. The difference is they made us put it on in the numbers, basically. And so you've got an obligation for a lease, and you're going to have to pay for it for several years. And so they made you put the leased asset and the obligation on your financial statements. In the past, you would just see that in your disclosure. And it would be a commitment disclosure. So anybody that read your financial statements and your notes would know you had that commitment. The same thing on the lease where you're the leaseor. You know, you might not have all those balances in there, but there would be disclosure around that lease. So I guess I mean, the GASB thinks it helped out a lot, and it put these assets and liabilities that previously weren't quantified in your financials. But, you know, from somebody that's been looking at these for years, all that information was in your financials. They just were in the footnotes instead, so.
Sounds like the real question is, Ms. Ewing, how much more work did Gatsby create for you?
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot more work. And this is not just a GASB thing. This is going to fall out with the FASB for 1231. So any of these for-profit businesses, I know you guys may be involved in business arrangements, they're going to have to adopt the same thing. It's similar. It's a FASB. And so basically if they have a long-term lease that they previously just disclosed, they're going to have to record a right of use asset and a lease liability, and same thing for a leaseor arrangements. And for governmental entities, I guess, I haven't had any that it affected their debt covenants negatively, but I do have some for-profit companies that they are actually having to have conversations with their banker and have amendments to their debt covenants written because of this. So I don't know, you know, whether it really made things better because they're just writing these covenants to get around it. So, yeah. But it's pretty pervasive. It's not just the GASB actually was first. Usually FASB adopts something and then the next year GASB adopts it. But this got put off because of COVID, and the FASB put it off a little bit longer than GASB did. So you guys got to be the guinea pigs for it. So, yeah.
Any other questions for Ms. Roberts?
Thank you.
Did you have something to add?
Yeah, I did
apologize.
have
Go
something
ahead.
else. There is another report in here on financial reporting that's on page 141 and 142, and I just wanted to point out if we had any problems with your financial reporting that we thought were significant deficiencies or material weaknesses, they would be reported here, and we didn't have any of that. And also if we had any issues with doing the extra procedures that we need to do for your state code compliance, we go in and look at some things that are required by the APA in the state code. If we had any compliance issues, they'd be reported here too. They aren't reported here because we did not have any. And I can go over the management letter if you'd like me to, but.
Please do.
Okay. The other document that you got is what we traditionally call the management letter. And most of this is boilerplate, and so I'm just gonna go through the stuff that's more specific to the school board. But in general, these are communications that are required. If you look at page 1, this is our contact information. It would have been a stapled document. It says report to the honorable members of the school board. Okay. On page 1 is my contact information, your engagement manager, and in charge's contact information. Of course, you could get that from Renee and her team at any point too. But if you needed to talk to us about something, or if after I do this presentation and you look at these financials in more detail and you have questions, feel free to call me. Be happy to answer any questions. Moving on to page 1, like I said, a lot of it's boilerplate. If you have any changes in accounting policies, then we point those out. And you can see in the second paragraph, we talk once more about GASB 87 leases because it is a big change. If you have any significant estimates that are embodied in your financials, then we point those out. And you can see that you've got those 3 bullet points at the bottom part of page 2, which is not numbered, but it's on our letterhead. And your big estimates are OPEB, pension, because that's a big actuarial study. So those are built on lots of assumptions, and they are ultimately estimates. And another big estimate is the calculation of these lease receivables. We have to determine a discount rate and also make assumptions about whether you're going to renew these leases or not. And so there's some estimates there. Also, the depreciable lives of your assets, that's a big estimate because we don't know how long these things are going to last, but we use historic estimated lives to do that, or the school board does it, and we take no exception with the lives that they've assigned. Moving on to the next page, there's a section for difficulties encountered in the audit and disagreements with management. I always like to point out if that's totally boilerplate. If I had any of that, we'd be talking to you much earlier and you'd be aware of it before I sat down here and told you about it. So just pointing that out, we didn't have any difficulties, we didn't have any disagreements. If we have any corrected and uncorrected misstatements, we point those out. We did not have any uncorrected misstatements and we didn't have any material audit adjustments. So pointing that out. Appendix A is the management rep letter. That is what the management signs at the end of the audit, just kind of a hold harmless. We've given you everything. We've been forthcoming with all the information. And also, at the end, starting on page 6, is a summary of all the new GASBs coming down the pike. So if you want to read about what's coming up, you can read about it. I don't think there's any of these that will be particularly impactful for the school board, except possibly the subscription-based information technology arrangements. Basically, they're making you do the same thing we did with leases, with those types of contracts. So, and I don't know, Ms. Hummel, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think that's more of something that's disclosed but not booked. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm going to give this to my accounting professor who deals with GASB, FASB, and does government and nonprofit.
Yeah,
No,
well,
just
they'll
kidding.
enjoy reading through
No,
that.
I'm sure she finds this stuff riveting.
I don't know if I could say I find this riveting. I think that the lease thing was pretty much an exercise, and I'm not sure how much that increased the transparency or disclose, the understanding of the ultimate understanding. But anyway, that's all I had to present. Do you have any additional questions?
Well, I would say from my seat, it looks like you do find it riveting. It looks like you really enjoy this. And
Well,
I
I enjoy
appreciate
reporting on
and
it.
I appreciate
like
that
to
about
talk,
you.
But yeah.
I appreciate that about you. I
Yeah.
think that's who we need looking at our books from a very unbiased standpoint. So thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for your work.
Thank you.
And Brown Edwards.
Yeah.
All
Your
right.
team works really hard, so we
We
can
know
come
they
in
do.
here and do this work.
We know they do. Thank you, Ms. Ewing. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item 6.2, our overview of ARP ESSER III funding. Dr. Heron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the leader of that hard-working team is on again this evening talking about ESSER III funding, and I'm going to pass right over to Ms. Ewing.
Thank you, Dr. Heron. This evening, we will be providing an update on the status of our American Rescue Plan, or ARP funds. The purpose of the American Rescue Plan, or ARP Act, Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief, or ESSER III Fund, is to help safely reopen and sustain the safe operation of schools and address the impacts of COVID-19 on the nation's students by addressing students' academic, social, emotional, and mental health needs. Our total award amount is $11,091,068, which is derived from a formula allocation based on Title I allocations. Funds must be expended by September 30th, 2024. In general, the funds have the same permissible uses as other federal programs, but all expenditures under ESSER III must address the effects of COVID-19 on school operations. Some examples of allowable uses of the funding include instructional resources and materials, supporting virtual instruction, and staff to provide academic and mental health supports to students. Of our total award amount, the Act requires that at least 20% of the funding be used to measure and address the academic impact of lost instructional time on all students. This amounts to approximately $2.2 million of our total allocation. Funds must be used on evidence-based interventions, must address social, emotional, and mental health and academic needs, and address the disproportionate impact on various student groups. The ARP Act requires each LEA that receives ARP ESSER funds to develop and make publicly available on the LEA's website a plan for the safe return to in-person instruction and continuity of services. Our forward WJCC plan satisfies this requirement. Return to Learn information was provided at board meetings early on during the pandemic and updated on our website periodically. The Act also requires that the plan be reviewed and revised, if necessary, at least every 6 months for the duration of the grant period. The review of our plan has been completed each June and December since the awarding of the funds. In fiscal year 22, these funds were used to support personnel for summer school, site-based subs at each school and Bright Beginnings, virtual academy teachers, including 2 special education teachers, contact tracers, and an LPN. Other expenses in fiscal year 22 were related to professional learning, focusing on learning loss, online tutoring hours, storage facility rental, and instructional materials. Total expenditures in fiscal year 22 amounted to approximately $1.4 million. In the current year and next year, grant funds are continuing to support personnel in our virtual academy program, site-based subs at the schools and Bright Beginnings, elementary math interventionists, summer school, and tutoring services. You will see a decline in the estimated amount for fiscal year 24 as we plan to continue transitioning positions into the operating budget during the upcoming budget cycle. We anticipate spending approximately $727,000 on transportation services, virtual Virginia services, and online tutoring in the current year, and $600,000 next year. Grant funds are being utilized to support trailer leases at our elementary schools to allow for smaller class sizes to facilitate learning recovery. This will continue through September 2024. Material and supply expenses consist of air filtration and sanitation supplies, instructional resources such as decodable elementary books, reading and math remediation materials, and convertible learning spaces. Funds will also be used to create outdoor learning spaces at several schools. During fiscal year 2022, we spent approximately $1.4 million. Planned spending for fiscal years 23 and 24 amount to approximately $9.7 million. Our estimated total devoted to learning loss is approximately $5 million, or 45% of our total grant award. These funds are being spent on items such as robust summer program offerings, in-school and after-school tutoring, online tutoring, and elementary math interventionists. A recent requirement from the Virginia Department of Education is to update our original spending plan and reopen public consultation about the plan. We will have the updated plan posted on our website later this week, utilizing the template provided by DOE, and plan to send a survey out on Friday that will be open until December 18th. And this concludes our update on the status of our ARP funds, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Ewing. Keep muting myself, I apologize. Thank you, Ms. Ewing. Any questions for Ms. Ewing or Dr. Herron? Did you have something, Ms. Young?
No, I just was
Saw you
thinking
leaning
about
forward, okay.
Ms. Ewing saying that we're going to get some information eventually about the use of that $18 million. Is that correct? Did I hear that correctly?
Sorry, can you repeat that, Ms. Young?
I mean, there was one point in there where it showed that there was $18 million left over from the use and from the ESSER funds. Are we going to receive some information about that?
And in the audit.
Yeah, that was. Oh.
Is this statewide?
Oh, never mind. I think I was looking at that. I don't know what I'm. Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
If you have a question, you can send it to us, Ms. Young, and we'll try and answer it for
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Ortega?
Yeah, it's probably, could probably glean it from this, but just for ease, if 45% is learning loss amount, how would you characterize the other 55%?
So our original spending plan, they had different categories, and I don't have a copy of it with me this evening, but I could go back to that and categorize it for you. There were specific things that are considered learning loss. Our original plan had items like the lease for the trailers isn't part of learning loss, so it is not.
Okay.
Also, prevention and mitigation strategies were a huge piece at the beginning of the pandemic, and some funds were directed towards that as well.
Sorry, I didn't hear. What mitigation?
Prevention and mitigation strategies for COVID were a significant cost at the beginning of the pandemic, and funds were directed towards that as well. That was one of the categories.
Thank you, Ms. Ortega. Any others? I just had one under purchase services lumped together. We see virtual Virginia fees. We also see that I guess the projected amount spent for purchase services drops between 23 and 24. Yes, there's two questions there. Why do we see a decline of about 127,000 roughly, but more, I guess, more specific to what I'm interested in, the virtual Virginia fees. What's the division's plan for virtual Virginia? Probably not prepared with the number of students that are actively engaged in virtual Virginia, but is this going to continue to be a focus for instructional?
Yeah, we will still offer virtual options through Virtual Virginia as we stand down our virtual academy in-house because of numbers of students served in that right now. And so there always will be money spent to allow students to take certain classes through Virtual Virginia. That'll be ongoing.
Okay. And then the less 127,000, I see leases and rentals pretty much level. I'm just curious about purchase services.
I can get more detail for that on you,
Okay.
for you. Yeah, we
curious.
have a spreadsheet with all the information.
That'd be
I can
great.
send that to you.
Thank you.
I think as we move towards the last year of the grant, we're standing down some of the services and things on the grant because it goes away completely.
Gotcha.
It's same with personnel, we've been bringing personnel into the grant last year, and we'll be bringing in the budget this year so they come out of the grant before the grant expires.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Great. Well, thank you very much, Ms. Ewing, for all your hard work that we're very familiar with. Thank you so much. Item 6.3, portrait of a graduate for class of 2022.
Thank you,
Dr.
Mr. Chair. Dr. Worley's here this evening to give us our annual presentation of Portrait of a Graduate, and I think she's going to introduce some special guests this evening as well. Dr. Worley.
Good evening, Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Heron. I do have two special guests with me this evening. Ms. Newcomb is sitting beside Dr. Heron, and she will assist with a part of the presentation this evening. I have Mr. Townsend sitting in the back, and Mr. Rice is here in spirit. He was here up until a few moments ago. We were running a little behind, and he's supporting his own son in a band concert this evening, so he is with us in spirit. Tonight, we are happy to share with you information related to WJCC's Portrait of a Graduate for the class of 2022. The information presented this evening represents a collaborative effort between school leadership, accountability, school counseling, our high school principals, graduation coaches, and staff. All right. Been one technical difficulty here.
Oh, here we go.
There we go. As part of this overview, we will look at graduation rates, Scholastic Aptitude Test or SAT results, advanced placement information, American College Testing or ACT results, and during the presentation we will refer to information on the slides, and you may also reference data on your one-page digital handout as well. The cohort class of 2022 began with 977 students, with 919 of the 977 graduating on time in 2022. This equates to a 94.1% earning a diploma within 4 years. This data chart summarizes the breakdown of demographics seen in shades of blue on the left, as well as reporting groups seen in shades of green on your right. It's important to note that graduates may be in more than one demographic category. The class of 2022 had an on-time graduation rate, or OTGR, of 94.1%, with 41.5%, or 374 students, earning a standard diploma, and 52.6%, or 500 students earning an advanced studies diploma. The OTGR is the percentage of students graduating in 4 years with the state-approved diploma. You can also see that our cohort completion rate, also known as the CCR rate, is 97.6%. The CCR includes on-time graduates, GEDs, and students completing high school in 5 or more years. And finally, the dropout rate for this class was 2.5%, or 24 students. The next slide shows our 3-year trend rate for on-time graduation. WJCC graduation rates are represented in blue on the left, and the state rates are in orange on the right. Our current overall on-time graduation rate exceeds the state average at 94.1%. The next slide takes a deeper look at the class of 2022. The blue bars show graduation rates for individual reporting groups. The gray shows the actual number of 2022 graduates and the total number of students in the original cohort for each reporting group. For example, the blue bar on the far right represents students with disabilities. Students with disabilities in the class of 2022 had a 95% on-time graduation rate, with 131 of 138 students graduating on time. It is important to note that students can be in more than one reporting group. For example, a student may be counted in the white reporting group and the economically disadvantaged group. I'll pause for a moment for you to look at the different reporting groups.
Can we ask questions as we go?
Are you ready to answer questions?
I can.
I'm just looking at the English language learner number, and I recognize that there's overlap, but I think you said earlier 24 children were in the dropout, the 2.5%. Was that the number that you said? 24 students were in the
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, and that represents 18. So I'm just wondering if 18 of the 24 were English language learners.
I do have that in my data, and yes, 18 of English language learners did not graduate with that cohort, yes.
So the 6
yes.
others that were not
yes.
English language learners.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry.
No problem. All right, the next slide shows our WJCC reporting group comparisons with the state. The state is represented in blue on the left, and WJCC is represented in orange on the right. As you can see from this slide, we exceed the state average in the white and black student reporting groups. We are a little behind the state in Hispanic and economically disadvantaged reporting groups. Our SPED reporting group is aligned with the state at 95%, and we have a larger achievement gap within English language learners. The next slide shows our WJCC 3-year trend data of our reporting groups. 2020 is represented by the dark blue bar on the left, 2021 by the gray bar in the middle, and the class of 2022 is represented by the lighter blue bar on the right. We continue to remain consistent in most categories. We did see a 3% increase in the black reporting group. Once again, we see a larger achievement gap for our English learners. One important piece of information to note is our 2021 English learner cohort with a 70% on-time graduation rate benefited from accommodations allotted in Executive Order 51, which is no longer in effect. This allowed school divisions the ability to grant 1 additional locally verified credit for SOL courses to students impacted by the pandemic. Now we will look at individual high school data. Each high school slide will show a 3-year trend with the school as the first bar in gray, division in the center in blue, and the state in orange. The Jamestown High School class of 2022 has an on-time graduation rate of 94.4%. This rate exceeds the state by 2.3 percentage points. The Lafayette class of 2022 also has an on-time graduation rate of 94.4%, and this exceeds the state rate by 2.3 percentage points. And our War Hill class of 22 has an on-time graduation rate of 93.5%, which is an increase over last year's rate of 92.1%. This rate exceeds the state by 1.4 percentage points. The previous slides primarily addressed our progress with on-time graduation. as this is how the state of Virginia calculates graduation towards accreditation. However, federal accountability measures graduation through the cohort completion rate. The cohort completion rate again includes our on-time graduates, our students earning GEDs, and students completing high school in 5 or more years. As you can see on the slide above, the CCR for Jamestown High School is 97%, or 315 of 324 students earning credentials to complete high school. The CCR for Lafayette High School is 96%, and for War Hill High School is 97.7%. And the overall CCR for Williamsburg is 97.6%. Although we continue to prioritize on-time graduation, we do recognize there are many pathways to achieve the same goal after high school. GED credentials for the completion of high school give students access to community college, which can lead to a 4-year university, trade or technical schools, credentialed careers, or directly to the military and/or work. The picture on this slide represents our June 2022 celebration of our GED graduation for all 3 high schools. The cohort of 22 had 29 GED graduates. Before moving on to other data points connected to the class of 22, it might be helpful to share some data points connecting the performance of the class of 22 to our pre-pandemic class of 2019. The chart above compares the on-time graduation rate and the cohort completion rate from the class of 2019 to the class of 2022. The on-time graduation rate for our class of 2022 is 94.1%, which is higher than the on-time graduation rate for the class of 2019, which was 92.6%. Similar to the on-time graduation rate, our cohort completion rate for the class of 22 was 97.6%, which is again higher than the cohort completion rate for the class of 2019 at 95.2%. Let's take a deeper look at this comparison of the class of 22 to the pre-pandemic class of 2019. The blue bars on the chart above represent the on-time graduation rate for the class of 2019. The orange bars above represent the on-time graduation rate for the class of 2022. The numbers above the bars indicate actual graduation percentage rate. The numbers inside each bar represent the total number of students in the reporting group that year, along with the number that graduated out of that cohort. For example, if you look at the blue and orange columns on the far right, you will see the on-time graduation rate for students with disabilities for the class of 2019 was 90%, with 113 students graduating out of 125 students in the cohort. Also, the on-time graduation rate for students with disabilities in the class of 2022 was 95%, with 131 students graduating out of the cohort of 138. As you can see from the data on this slide, we continue to make progress through and post the national pandemic. We made progress in almost every reporting group, and we are supporting more learners in some reporting groups as seen in the total for each reporting group. For example, we can see an increase in students with disabilities from 125 in 2019 to 138 in 2022. Over the next few slides, we will take a look at our data for the Scholastic Aptitude Test, commonly known as the SAT, and the American College Test, better known as the ACT. Williamsburg had 428 students participate in the SAT, which represents 44% of our graduates. There are 2 main subtests, combined reading, writing, and math, which are both scored on a scale of 200 to 800 possible points. The highest composite score for SAT is 1,600, and as a benchmark reference, the overall average score is approximately 1,000. This data on the slide outlines the performance of the 2022 WJCC cohort on the SAT compared to the state and the nation. WJCC is represented in blue, the state in gray, and the nation is represented in yellow. The overall composite for Williamsburg 2022 graduates was 1,126, and the average reading writing subtest score was 577, and the average math subtest was 549. As a point of reference, this next slide outlines 4 years of historical data revealing that revealing that WJCC average composite score continues to outperform the state and the nation. The numbers in smaller font represent the number of test takers we had in Williamsburg for 2022. You might notice a significant dip in test takers in 2021 due to the impact of the pandemic. We did see an increase of a little over 100 test takers this year. Our participation rates seem to correlate with admission requirements of colleges and universities, and we do not anticipate we'll see much of an increase in participation until the requirements from colleges and universities change, as many are still making that optional. However, our students are still taking the tests. Next, we will see how our students performed on the ACT, which serves as an indication of the extent to which students are prepared for college-level work in reading, English, math, and science. Scores range from 1 to a maximum of 36, and the ACT writing is an optional section. It is important to note that the ACT reports data on all students taking the test. Therefore, this slide reflects total participation versus data on just the class of 22. Students earn one overall ACT score, commonly known as the ACT composite, which is an average of the 4 test scores in English, math, reading, and science. The composite score falls between the ranges of 1 to 36. During the 21-22 school year, 89 students participated in the ACT, and the WJCC overall ACT composite score is 25.5. This is slightly above the state and 5.7 points ahead of the nation. Next, we will take a look at our advanced placement or AP results. The College Board reports data on all AP tests across the division. Therefore, this does not represent only students in the class of 22, but the scores reflect any exam taken in the 21-22 school year. AP courses offer high school students opportunities to complete college-level courses and potentially earn college credit while still in high school. Colleges and universities often consider awarding credit to students who score a 3, 4, or 5 on an AP exam and exempt them from coursework. Students across all 3 high schools participate in advanced placement or AP courses with the option to participate in an AP exam. This slide shows the percentage of AP exams with a score of 3 or higher at the division level, as well as broken down by the high school level. For example, across all 3 high schools in Williamsburg, 836 exams had a score of 3 or higher, which is 68%. Across the division in 2022, 631 students participated in 1,229 tests. Remember that students can take more than one test based on the number of AP courses they are taking. The next slide shows us trend data across 4 years of AP data. Slide shows the percentage of tests where the scores were 3, 4, or 5 at the division level and by school. In the 2022 column, the small number below the percentage represents the total number of tests given at the designated location. As a division, we are currently in line with pre-pandemic AP testing in 2019. Finally, our summer school of 2022 provided another support system and opportunity for all high school students to recover credits and for seniors to graduate from high school. This year we had 5 summer graduates. Students recovered 123 high school credits. 97 students earned accelerated credits in health and PE or personal finance. And additionally, we had 12 students participate in a pilot program for students transitioning from middle to high school, and they successfully earned an elective credit in career strategies over the summer. We've covered a significant amount of data connected to the class of 22. You may ask, how do we support students and facilitate success throughout our schools? And more importantly, how will we continue to enhance these efforts and continue to close achievement gaps? The answer is continued collaboration and teamwork. This is paired with individualized, timely, and tiered academic support or interventions for students. The collaboration of key personnel is an essential piece of this puzzle. Our teams are intentional with their work to include daily and weekly database conversations to refine interventions and student support. These conversations take place during CTT and or PLC team meetings. Our graduation teams at each school, led by our graduation coaches and principals, make tracking every cohort and each individual a priority beginning in the 9th grade. Schools provide pathways to credit recovery for students who previously failed courses, as well as opportunities for in-course intervention and remediation. Credit recovery opportunities are offered during the year and in summer school, and tiered support for learning during the day is a priority for schools, with the focus again on timely intervention. Moving forward, we will continue to expand our strategies and enhance differentiation and small groups in the classroom as needed. All of the remarkable work in progress highlighted this evening would not be possible without the dedication of our teachers, administrative teams, all under the leadership of our amazing high school principals we introduced at the beginning. At this time, I would like Ms. Newcomb, principal of War Hill High School, to share the voice of principals, including some success stories from the class of 2022.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Herron. I'm honored to share examples of the incredible work WJCC staff members implemented over the course of the 2021-2022 school year. Each school year, we actively embrace every moment, morning, afternoon, evening, and even weekends, to engage with all students and to proactively get all students on track, especially our seniors. Our goal is to work within and across our community to provide every student the opportunity to graduate. Our schools collaborate on many things. However, we always keep the individual student, his or her needs, and the person as a priority, not just the data or numbers on a chart. So I'm happy to share a few examples of the heart work that took place at all 3 high schools during the 21-22 school year. I'll start with a story from Jamestown High School. Last year, the multilingual learner teachers asked the ML students to craft graduation speeches. One student's speech exemplifies the level of support offered at Jamestown. A young man born in Guatemala to a family that valued work over education came to the United States at the age of 16 to work for a better life. Once here, he realized that there would be many barriers to his pursuit of employment and that an education would be necessary to break down those barriers. However, not being able to speak English put him at a disadvantage. There were many times he wanted to give up, but a promise to his mother and the ongoing support and patience of the graduation coach, assistant principals, school counselor, and his teachers allowed him to keep that promise and to earn his high school diploma. Next, a story from Lafayette High School. A particular 2022 graduate faced many difficulties that were overcome by her support from Ram Nation. She battled a significant medical issue that affected her path to graduation due to its impact on her school attendance. This put quite a strain on her ability to keep up with her coursework. She worked with her school counselor to target specific courses needed for graduation, and the LHS School Improvement Specialist made special arrangements for her to take her Reading SOL one-on-one due to her illness. She had many mentors in the building, including teachers and support staff, and the relationships she built within Ram Nation kept her motivated to not give up on her goal of graduating from high school. Despite all that she faced, her positive attitude and the support of many dedicated staff helped her meet that goal. Finally, a story from War Hill High School. A 2022 War Hill graduate transferred from another school division within the state in March of his senior year. When he arrived, he was behind on credits and struggling to pass the required courses to graduate on time. He was ready to give up. While his parents supported his desire to drop out, the staff at War Hill would not accept that as an option. With support from our graduation coach, his school counselor, the intervention specialist, and teachers, he was able to recover course content through Edmentum and get back on track. His English teacher even set up Zoom sessions with him every other day to provide him additional content support. With a renewed commitment, he was able to complete his courses and graduate on time. The Pride truly stepped up to show that every student, no matter when they arrive, are important. As you can see, WJCC is a division committed to seeing many more stories like the ones you've just heard, as we are a team that cares. Our leadership teams are invested in the school community, and we strive to build positive relationships with our students and families. The pictures on this slide show graduates and our leadership teams at work. Each year, we will continue to focus on making a difference every day for individual students as we try to close the achievement gaps and help every student define a post-secondary path to success in life. We are WJCC.
Thank you, Ms. Newcomb. As you all hear me say every year, a graduation rate is a percentage representing a number, and our school teams know each individual name connected with every number, including their needs, strengths, and goals for the future. This is very hard work, and it's hard work, facilitated by a school community who really cares. The faces you see on this last slide represent the why behind all of our efforts to help every student succeed. Thank you for your time this evening, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you both. Thank you both, and everyone that's prepared these presentations and the stats and the data. Dr. Beers,
Yeah.
I'll let you lead off here.
What really strikes me when I,
Put your mic.
I'm sorry, oh, sorry. What really strikes me as I looked over the data, even when they're really, they're actually quite small differences between the state and our
Yes, sir.
and our high schools, and they're not statistically, it's not a significant difference. But what really struck me is I keep hearing about learning loss. And when you see these numbers and you see how they have stayed relatively stable and have actually gone up, whether it's graduation rate, whether it's performance on AP exams, it really points out once again how dedicated and committed and hardworking our teaching staff is. It's really, I know there was learning loss. Sometimes I have a hard time trying to define what is that? What is learning loss? Is it based on numbers? Is it based on what you remember, what you forget? And but at least at the high school level, it's just to me it's incredible, and my hat's off to all three of the high schools and their principals and staff. It just it's like we don't need to keep talking about learning loss. Really don't. That's great.
Ms. Hundley, and then Ms. Young.
Yes, thank you definitely for the report. It was very encouraging. I have a concern just with the ELL, and I guess more so a question. So the students, I know in elementary they come in as 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s. The ones in high school, I guess I'd like a little bit more information. Are those students that maybe came here that don't have any English at all?
Sure.
Or have they come through?
I have some data on that I can
Okay.
share. We had 18 students from that group that did not graduate on time, and 11 of those 18 students were in the U.S. for less than 2 years. And all 18 students had an ELD level of less than 2.9, indicating very low levels of English language proficiency. And some are here for a very short period of time and may go back to their country.
So, and I know we're going to have funds. I heard, tutoring. That's one group. Do they take advantage when we have those kinds of wraparound programs
Yes, ma'am.
for them?
Some do, and we are looking to really dig a little deeper in that. In some of our work, one of the things that we noted when we dove into this data is there's an opportunity to maybe connect some of these students to work-based learning because they're here to work. So we have some other additional ideas that we have already started to work on that we will continue to embrace.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hundley. Ms. Young.
Right, one of the things that, I noticed you differentiated between on-time graduation rates and cohort. I'm going back to the English as a second language students. Do some of those students stay an extra, are they allowed to stay an extra year to continue improving their language skills so that they can graduate?
Yes, and some will graduate, and there are different. For our multi-language learners and our students with disabilities, they have some accommodations with extra time for earning a diploma. And we do work with those, and a lot of them end up graduating with our EL group within 5 years. We track them down personally. I know we have some principals that go to their jobs and talk to their managers about time for school and time for working.
I can see Mr. Townsend doing that too.
We've spent some time at the Great Wolf Lodge, I think.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Ms. Hummel?
So first of all, I want to really thank you for this presentation, and I really appreciate showing the actual numbers in addition to the percentages, because in the past, sometimes we're looking at those and we're like, but what does that mean with the actual real number? So thank you so
You're
much
welcome.
for providing that. On page or slide 14, I just had a general, it's the WJCC on-time graduation reporting groups.
Yes.
So, there seems between 2019 and 2022, I know we've lost students, but I thought we were kind of catching up or almost catching up, but it doesn't look like that for so many of these reporting groups. Like,
You mean in population?
population. So, for example, like the Hispanic, we've lost, 10 there over 3 years, 20 economically advantaged students, that was an increase. So I guess I'm just wondering, and then for English learners, it was a decrease of 20 students. And I had the same question that Ms. Hunley had. So we've lost the English learners, but they're it's a more challenging group to work with. Because
Right. So, and we're just looking at a class or a cohort, and some of these, it gets a little tricky because some of the L students they are here 5 years, they become what we call sliders, and they come up in another year of data. We also have, if memory serves me correctly, I think this year we have close to 100 more EL students in our total population represented across 4 different grade levels. So, yes, it looks a little different, but this presentation is comparing seniors. And I get it, it looks like, well, if we're increasing, why wouldn't we see that number of population go up?
And then I guess my only other question is about the SATs and the ACTs, and are you hearing buzz that the universities will start wanting standardized tests to come back, since it seems to be problematic from the university standpoint to determine who actually is qualified to a certain extent to be in some of the college level classes when there are absolutely no standardized tests to judge.
We're kind of waiting to see what to expect. We're not sure, but right now, there's definitely not as much emphasis on that as in the past. We were happy to see that we had 100 more students take the test. So we're kind of waiting to see.
Yeah, I'm seeing from the university standpoint, it's really hard to gauge student readiness when those standardized tests are not in the picture.
Right.
Okay, well, thank you. Thanks for your efforts.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Hummel. Ms. Ortega?
Just sort of along those lines, I'm not totally sure how to phrase the question, but in addition to SOLs becoming sometimes optional or SATs becoming optional, I just want to confirm that all other graduation standards have remained exactly the same throughout the last 3 years. Is that correct?
As far as an advanced diploma and a standard diploma?
Or just, to achieve high school graduation.
Right.
Nothing has changed.
The state has made some adjustments in the number of verified credits, which are credits for passing an SOL test. They've reduced the number. But as far as content, they're taking the same amount of courses that they've been taking for the past several years.
One
I
more
could send you a
question.
breakdown of that if you want me to.
Ms. Hummel?
I just have one more question. So with the ELL students, I know there's an ELL teacher that serves them, and most ELL teachers do not speak the language. Who else do we have that supports them that speaks the language other than the interpreter that we sometimes get help from?
That would depend on who's in the building that could speak the language, but our teachers are given strategies to be able to, if you're a multi-language teacher, you are using strategies to connect with students with multiple languages, not just one. So we utilize the resources that we can come up with, and some may have people that can speak different languages in the building that will certainly use that, but that is one of the, I won't use the word barrier, but one of the struggles that we have, which we're working to kind of give our teachers some new strategies to help them with that, because that's tough.
Yes, Ms. Young, again.
I was just going to say, I was at Lafayette, I think I was with Dr. Beers that day, and there was a history class being taught in the library, and there was a teacher that was speaking Spanish, because there was a large number of students who did not speak English, so it was being taught in both languages. It was really impressive, and it was very engaging. The kids were very engaged. It was fun to watch. So just a kudos to Lafayette.
Again, thank you for this presentation, the information provided. I love that we're pursuing every single student to graduation, despite their best efforts to say, I can't do it. You're proving to them, helping them understand that anything is possible. So I really love hearing that. Thank you for the statistical comparison from 22 to 2019. I'm not exactly there with Dr. Beers, but I hear what you're getting at with regard to learning loss. Where's the learning loss? But I really love seeing that we've made some real strides in this cohort in particular. I mean, there are many others, of course, that we serve, but in this cohort particularly, 94.1%. Great. I would love to see us get even closer to that 100. So pat on the back, but let's keep working hard. You guys know what you're doing. We have faith in you, but keep pushing closer to that 100% with that goal in mind that no student is going to slip through our fingers. So great job. I find myself interested in AP testing all of a sudden. I'm just curious. It is just a curiosity. I don't know if you'll be able to share, but we find that most students that are enrolled in these AP testing or these AP courses, that they're actually taking the test, or there are other obstacles that prevent them or keep them from really considering going that next step, that extra mile.
So currently, it's optional for them to take the test, and students do pay for the test themselves. We do have means in place to accommodate students that have a need. I think in the past we have paid for all the tests. That's a conversation we've been having. We're pretty deep into the conversation, I think, before COVID kind of consumed a lot of our stuff, but we're back at it now, focusing on how we can get all students to take the test, and quite frankly, more students to be in the course and take the test. With being exposed to the curriculum and the rigor and the opportunity, they may not get the 3, 4, or 5, but that access to that instruction and the quality information is important.
Absolutely.
Mr. Darrow, that's probably a budget conversation if it's something the board wants to consider, because it was paid for and it was required of students to take the test at some point several years ago. Can you remember which year?
This is Hummel's favorite topic.
And due to budget cuts, that was one of the things that was cut many years ago. But you can require students to take the test if we're prepared to pay for it.
I'm one board member, but I'd be interested to know what that looked like then and what that might look like today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There were issues, just to be frank, there were issues with when we just did a carte blanche and paid for every single student to take an AP test, and they would just Christmas tree the AP test because they didn't care what score they got. And so I think there's that balance between giving students a little, to have a little something in the game. Skin in the game. That was what I was going to say.
Yep.
Right.
Or their parents' skin in the game.
Hey, we're all paid up. 2 kids. So.
Sometimes. Yes. It's just one of those things that
Very good. Well, thank you, everybody, for your fantastic work. We applaud you both. And our Lafayette principal. Please extend the congratulations.
Here. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to, and I want to kick this over to Dr. Beers, item 6.4, to provide a really brief, high-level examination of our school board annual self-evaluation. That is now on our executive content.
Did you say high level?
I'll let you run with it. You go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. First of all, for the public, this is a task that we complete every year to help determine what areas we have been successful in the board, and also what areas we need to consider, because sometimes they're new things, and then areas that we have been engaged in that may need some modification, correction, whatever it might be. So what we have and what we all completed, we used a form that was put together by the Virginia School Board Association. And the first part of the form is a list of characteristics. And I guess I would say a list of characteristics that a good board would exhibit. And for each one of those, we've each of us decides, do we strongly agree with that statement? Do we agree? Do we not agree? Do we strongly disagree? And then there are several, I think there were 3 or 4, maybe 5, I can't remember, of these characteristics where we're asked to do something or to respond to something. It might be for number 2, for example, we've defined goals towards our vision of high expectations, identify a goal. And so each of us thinks about that and identifies a goal. Or number 3, we have strong shared beliefs and values about what is possible for students. And then the request is for each of us to identify one of those shared beliefs and so on. There are other ones there. The second page, and what I tried to do was try to aggregate these comments that went along with each one of those 10 characteristics. And when there was duplication, often of comments, I did not necessarily include both of them because it was really, I felt it was, what was more important is to identify the idea or the notion that one or more board members had made. And then that is followed by 2 questions that this survey requires that we answer. One of them is, what is one of the board's greatest strengths? So each of us have an opportunity to think about that over the past year and identify what that board member felt was one of our greatest strengths. And then following that, the last one is particularly important because it helps to identify and that is what is a growth area for the board. That's particularly important because it not just encourages, it really sort of forces us to look carefully at what we've done as a board, individually and collectively, over the course of the last 12 months, and determine, based on our perceptions, what are some areas that we need to explore or we might consider as we move forward into the next year. And they're listed in there. And what I did, rather than go over all of those, and all the board members have a copy of this, and it's also been posted. What I tried to do was reduce all of that, and I'm generalizing here, reduce all of that to what I thought were 5, 6 takeaways. If you look over the data and you look over the ranking from that, and I did particularly focus on the growth areas and also the comments that were made that went along with those 10 characteristics. And one of the takeaways I thought was the recognition that collaboration and interaction is really, really important for board members, and also not just for board members to engage in that, but for the board to engage in that with the public as well. And the public and the public's concern came up a number of times, and I'll mention that again here. I think that another takeaway, the word data showed up a lot of times with a lot of questions. And one of the things that I pulled out from there was the desire or the need or the wish for board members were wanting to have a better understanding of the data that is presented to the board, not just the what might be presented, but also the data that we use to create the data that is presented. Having being one that dealt with data for 40 years, where things turn into numbers and you talk about how significant is this difference. I think that would be useful as well. We don't have to have. We're not going to take a statistics course. It's not. I don't think we need that. But often, and even our superintendent has mentioned this, we see a lot. We see a lot of data. We look at a lot of it, and we look at a meeting, and there are times I think when we might want to go back and look at that a little more closely. Process and policies. That was my third one. Recognizing what process means and how we're supposed to use it, what it is. And on occasion, it's hard to discern what is the process, what was the process. Most of those areas that require process have been outlined either in our policies or in our, God, what is that called? COP?
SOP.
Yeah.
SOP.
Operationally defining how we go about doing things. And I thought that was important. And the second, and the other part of that was, because I thought process and policies really sort of went together too, is part of what identifies the process are the policies that we work with, that we change as things come up. And I think we need to continue to do that, and I think the board members made that pretty clear too from the comments that were made. Number 4, I thought a fourth takeaway, and there could be a number of reasons for this, but I think the notion or the idea that more attention needs to be paid to parents and parental concerns. I know we're really busy dealing with operational issues and budget and curriculum, but I think that's important. We don't hear from the majority of our parents. We hear from a very small percentage, except when we have them complete surveys. We get a lot of feedback that way. But I do think that that's the board feels that's important, and we need to consider that. And I guess I'd say the fifth one was the desire, I think, on the board to continue in the area of board development. Things like, and this is hard, because of some of the constraints are put on our abilities to meet. But I know that after any number of conferences that we've gone to, we get excited about things that we learn, but it's really hard to come together after that and debrief and go over what are the things that we learn. How can we how do we deal with that? And I think that's really important. And I guess probably the last one, and it's not actually in here. I don't know if I put that in there or not, but the fact that we do this once a year and we never come back to it, really. And then we go on to the next year and we have a retreat and we deal with it. So somehow I think we need to figure out a process, develop a policy that helps us sort of step back and bring some of those things forward and look at them more closely and not just we've done what we're supposed to do. And I shouldn't say that entirely. Some of these things do get put in place. The only other comment I would make, and I think this might suggest that we change the wording of some of these questions. What I noticed was that a number of comments really weren't directed at the board, and they really should be. It's a self-evaluation. It's not an evaluation of the superintendent. It's not an evaluation of any number of things. But what I really felt was there were a number of comments that were made that really didn't answer the question or really didn't focus on the board. And so what I found myself doing is doing things like the board urges, the board recommends, because I didn't see that sort of thing. And to me, that's the role of a board, to recommend, to bring things forward, to suggest, not just amongst ourselves, but with our superintendent, staff, everybody. So anyway, that's my.
Dr. Beers, I want to say thank you for, and you've done a great job on this task, this effort, this annual effort to bring together a collaboration of our board review, self-review, and I thank you for your leadership in that respect as well. One of the things that you touched on that, we shouldn't just do the task, we shouldn't just do a self-eval, check the boxes or what have you, and then say, all right, we've done it. So with that, in that respect, we will be, as a board, meeting in February 17th, in fact, to actually address this review, self-review, and to really get down into the nitty-gritty.
And that's a lot sooner. That's a lot sooner than we've been able to do it in the past. So I think that's really.
We'll get down to the nitty-gritty, and we'll have some real honest conversations about how to, with respect to something else you mentioned, board development, how to continue to develop as a good, cohesive board moving forward. So were there any questions or comments regarding anything that you had read? Ms. Cook, I see you.
Yeah, just as the sort of gray beard in the room, I would just like to, an observation is, and maybe my memory is not accurate, but I think the degree of consensus reflected in this document is different than in years past, and so I think that warrants some attention. Also, I hope that the person the city council appoints on Thursday is available at that day.
Yeah, we're gonna have to figure that out.
That's a wild card, I think.
Yeah. And by the way, we all have to be there for that board retreat.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's why I thought I'd mention it. Yeah.
So we'll make sure that we have that conversation with that new member, whoever he or she may be. All right. Seeing none, thank you again, Dr. Beers. Great job on this. We're going to move on to item 7.1, review of revisions to policy IGAK, alternatives to animal dissection. Dr. Aaron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Keever is with us virtually this evening. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Keever. And we're going to take a different approach to policies at this meeting. Mr. Keever is going to introduce each of the policies, and then we've staff members there to respond to some of the questions that you may have. Mr. Keever, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Herron. Good evening, members of the board. Appreciate the opportunity to join you this evening by Zoom. We have 10 policies to go through this evening. 2 of them are in the I category, and then 8 are in the G category, which generally falls under the human resources realm. First policy up for your consideration revolves around alternative to animal dissection, policy IGAK. There is some information available for you to provide in terms of overview pieces and want to give you an opportunity to ask any questions about the policy revisions to Ms. Ford, who's joining us this evening.
Mr. Kiefer?
Say that again, Mr. Dow, I'm sorry.
I was just saying thank you.
Oh, yes, sir.
Any thoughts from the policy committee on IGAK?
No, we just met and we talked, if you are looking at the redlined, there were just sentences that they struck because the most important part was the sentence there in green that just authorizes the superintendent or designee to create any necessary processes or procedures consistent with the policy and the VBOE guidelines for alternatives to animal dissection, because basically we need to follow the Virginia Board of Education's guidelines. And then because we always want to make sure that there's a link to, you know, the procedures or forms or whatever, we actually have the link there, and showing parents where on the division website they can go. And then we also just added legal guardian instead of parent or guardian, parent or legal guardian. So if anyone has any questions.
And we see that alternatives may include has been stricken, but we see that later in the green line request for alternatives to animal dissection there. Yes, Ms. Ortega.
Just to clarify, you're saying that if someone went into the policy, it will link directly to the form from the policy itself?
Well, we have the alternative, the cross references.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't link now, but
Oh, it doesn't?
It will?
I don't know. That's a good question. Is that possible? Or you just go to that regulation, right?
Mr. Kiefer?
Yeah, correct. The intent would be once the policy revisions are approved for the link to be live in board docs for both the regulation and the form.
All right. All right. Thank you. We'll move on to 7.2, review of revisions to policy IL testing programs.
Yes, sir. You may recall that we brought this policy forward about a month or so ago, and during conversation at the board meeting, there was some concern about language that seemed a bit confusing, I think, in terms of what the policy was trying to accomplish and what the goals were of the specific revisions. We've taken that back through legal counsel, and the line administering test or other assessment instruments school board employees will follow Virginia code and the guidelines from the Virginia Department of Education. We feel like clarify what the intent of the previous language was. Policy committee reviewed that and felt compelled for us to be able to bring this forward for the full board to review.
And so in a previous meeting, the discussion was around information that the student or parent chose not to disclose on a test, but then could administration go and find the information and put it on the test later. That was really the crux of our conversation.
That's right. I think the language within that initial policy revision that we brought forward came across as confusing, and we feel like this new additional language meets the code requirement and also is less confusing.
Just want to look around for head nods. Are we satisfied with this? All right, great. Thank you for that. Move on to 7.3, policy GCBC, staff benefits.
Yes, sir. This starts us off on a series of a number of policies related to some human resources items. And want the board to be aware that over the course of the last 5 or 6 months, members from the human resources team as well as the team from the finance department spent a great deal of time looking at our policies, processes, and procedures related to various things with an emphasis on benefits and leave, and how do we provide information to employees in a way that is easy to find, to discern, and then also creates opportunities for us to be more consistent as an organization. So the first particular policy that you'll see this evening with 7.03 staff benefits is really focused on the idea of establishing that the board is responsible for the determination of benefits and the superintendent will promulgate regulations in order to meet the policy.
Promulgate rather than establish. I was just curious.
Yeah, the attorney, when we went back and asked that question, felt like promulgate was the right word. I think that you will see establish, develop, but in this particular case, our attorney recommended that we go with the word promulgate.
Okay.
And I'm actually looking it up just
Thank you.
because
Yeah.
I'm like, so it means to promote or make widely known an idea that, so rather than just establishing it, actually the emphasis is to make it widely known what these benefits are. So I think that's a great choice of words.
Because it's been previously established by the school board, according to the green line.
Right. And just that there is this obligation to make it widely known, which I think is great.
All right. Questions other than that? Comments? Okay. We're going to move right along. Mr. Keever, item 7.4, GCBD.
GCBD is staff leaves and absences. This particular policy revision, we felt like it was important to include some specific language on how Williamsburg James City County Schools define family for the purpose of all of the leaves and absences that are further delineated in regulation. Prior to this policy revision and currently in place, we have a single regulation that details all of staff leaves and absences. Through our review, we found this to be a challenge in terms of all information in a single place and difficult sometimes for staff to be able to find and work through. So part of our revision process is to A, define very clearly what family means, and then B, to develop a series of 10 regulations breaking out the one single regulation so that all of the various lead pieces are included individually.
Questions for Mr. Keeper?
Makes a lot of sense.
My one question is this definition of family. I see a previous code section stricken and then a new section added. Are the definitions found in that amended code section, 22.178? I'm just curious.
I don't believe that the definition of family is found in that particular section. We attempted to define family based on the educational industry standard in terms of what other school divisions do and utilize when they are making determinations on family for the purpose of these leaves and absences.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Keever. Okay. I'm going to move on to 7.5 GCBDA sick leave bank.
Sick leave bank is a policy revision that we're bringing forward in order to. Let me back up. This particular benefit that is available to some members of our staff is not available to all members of our staff based on your status within VRS, and there are some members who can't access it because of their VRS1 or VRS2 status. We felt like it was important to be clear with respect to outlining of the regulation, which is an idea that we've created. So there's a regulation that was created with this, and outlines who would be eligible for the bank and how they would be able to be eligible for the bank. Also felt like this needed to be in regulatory language because within the policy language, if we needed to potentially make some revisions, it becomes oftentimes a little bit more difficult to navigate that, and it felt like it was administrative in nature after the overarching policy piece.
And so a regulation was created that didn't exist because the bulk of a regulation was embedded with the policy?
In fact, we've revised that regulation. There is a regulation excuse me, I'm looking at the wrong thing in front of me. We are creating that regulation.
Okay.
Wasn't there, when we were in policy meeting, you said something about that you had to have the policy first and then.
Correct.
And then the next thing would be the regulation that goes with the policy. You couldn't kind of do it in the other order.
Correct. That is correct.
And then the assumption is that you will link the cross-reference of GCBDA-R once we pass this.
Once the policy is approved.
So should we add at what point do we add the regulation in the cross-reference? Do we have to add that regulation as we're getting ready to approve the policy?
We could put that regulation, I believe, in draft form at the bottom of the policy, but regulation wise.
Mr. Keever, can I ask, just to
Yeah,
clarify,
sure.
Ms. Selma, you said we don't have a policy, but we do have a policy.
No, well,
Right.
this would be removing all of the red line, moving it into a regulation, but presently, the way this policy is written,
Yeah.
we don't have the cross-reference
Right.
for everything that we're striking out.
So I think along with what you're suggesting, perhaps, maybe we don't strike, maybe we don't create red lines yet, we let it sit, create the regulation,
Yeah,
and then bring the policy back.
I don't know what the process, whether we have to do the first and the, I don't know, but it's kind of hard to have us approve a policy if there isn't, just for our assurance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything that's stricken is somehow
sure.
somewhere.
But the
Go ahead, Ms. Cook.
regulations are within the purview of the administration, so they can conjure that up and not call it a draft right now. And so
Because there is a policy.
Right.
Right.
The regulation, excuse me, is actually attached at the bottom.
Right. So,
Right,
yeah.
but it's not in the cross-reference list on this. It's not listed as cross-reference.
We can add it as a cross-reference when it comes back to the board for approval.
That would be
and
great.
have it
Okay,
ready to be the regulation.
I would appreciate that.
Ms. Cook?
Yeah, so is it fair to say that this policy only applies to employees that are grandfathered in a certain benefit package and therefore will eventually sunset?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, that's fair.
The people in Plan 1, Plan 2, and VRS.
Okay, so this policy is not long for this world.
Correct.
Okay,
It'll sunset.
thank you.
Any others? Okay, item 7.6, GCBE. And just to clarify, we'll see in our next meeting the regulation attached to GCBDA.
That's right.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
GCBE.
Yes, sir. This is another example of a policy that we believe needs some revision. However, the revised policy we are bringing forward for the board's consideration is actually a more succinct version. All of the corresponding language to meet the federal requirements for family medical leave would come with the corresponding regulation that would be the follow-along for this. We have been in compliance with the current Family Medical Leave Act. We feel like the language would be better included in a regulation in the event that there needed to be revisions to that regulation based on changes to the federal law.
Okay.
So what you'll see is a regulation that could be 15 or 16 pages long versus a policy that's 15 or 16 pages long.
And are we seeing the regulation here?
You're seeing a version of the regulation in board docs. It says GCBE clean copy. GCBE-R clean copy.
But
So,
not
same
seeing
thing,
the cross-reference.
Yeah,
You're
same
not seeing the
thing.
cross-
Sure.
Just
Yeah.
add
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. GCBEA, leave without pay, item 7.7.
GCBEA, leave without pay. In this particular case, as we went through our review, we found some of the language included in this policy to be, I think, confusing. This policy is really about medical leave of absence without pay. In those cases where it be warranted for an employee to take a medical leave of absence. So we've added that language in front of some of those key areas to better define what this policy is attempting to accomplish. Previously calling it leave without pay, I think that's confusing because we do have employees that are in leave without pay status, and oftentimes that's disciplinary in nature. This has nothing to do with discipline and does have everything to do with ensuring there's a pathway forward when employees need a medical leave of absence.
Mr. Kiever, there's a separate policy for leave without pay that's not medically specific.
There's a regulation that deals with that.
Okay. Item 7.8, GCBEB, military leave and benefits.
The creation of a new policy to specifically delineate the expectations and requirements of the school board and the school division when it comes to employees who are also part of federally funded military duty, etc. This had previously been captured within some regulation language, GCPDR, but we feel like it's important to have this as a standalone policy.
It's interesting that you said that because as I was looking it over, it looked like there were regulatory pieces embedded, and we just got done with a conversation about that. So
I understand.
Okay.
But within the conversation with the human resources team and legal counsel, we do feel like this is the best course of action on this particular one.
Okay. I will not disagree. Item 7.9, GCDBD, sick leave donation and transfer.
1 second to scroll to that as well. In this particular case, we want to add language to clarify the process for requesting donation and also for donating leave. There is information in terms of specificity relative to number of days. We've created an exception for family members who are working within the division. There's also some information that has been clarified in terms of members on the hybrid plan in terms of VRS. We also wanted to utilize the opportunity here to talk about the process, because we feel like sometimes the process may not be as clear as it's needed to be, and feel like the language of this policy revision has done that.
Question, with the leave donation form, just like in some other cases or other policies where we have forms, is there a clear place for someone to go to know where to find that form?
That form right now is captured on the insider page, so it would be for our employees. We could talk about whether or not that form needed to be available to the general public, but it is available, and we would make sure that it's pronounced for us on the insider page for employees.
And maybe is that something that you say, like something like on the HR site, or would it be worth just throwing in an extra couple words so that someone knows where to find it?
We could look to add that.
Do you guys? I'm just throwing that out.
Yeah, we can certainly make it more specific. It just depends if the system changes or we want to put it in a couple of places just to make sure that it's easily accessible.
I mean, one of the things that Mr. Kiever said is whether or not we want it to be publicly available. Is there a reason it couldn't be? Because then it could be put in the cross references or you know, just form available and they could hit the link. I'm just wondering, is there a reason it couldn't be seen by the public?
I'm not sure I can think of a reason that it couldn't be seen. I do think we ought to talk a little bit administratively and internally about where specific forms are available, to the degree that I know we want to make it available in a prominent way for our employees, and I think we can accomplish that through the Insider webpage for staff members who've authenticated in.
Are we happy with that for now? Ms. Hummel? Okay. Ms. Cook?
I just have a kind of a contextual question because there's no VSBA policy that corresponds. Is this unique to this policy and this benefit, I guess I'll call it, unique to WJCC?
It is not, Ms. Cook. Mr. Baker, do you want to offer a little bit more additional information on that?
No, we find most of other school divisions have a similar policy.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and so our final policy of the evening, our 10th, retiring policy GCPC, retirement of full-time staff members.
Yes, sir. This particular policy really talked about a particular type of scenario related to A, health insurance, and then B, sick leave payout for those members of our staff who are retiring. So the information within this particular policy is captured under GCBCR staff benefits, that particular regulation that we looked at a little bit earlier. Felt like there wasn't a need for this policy as a standalone and could be incorporated into that regulation that we described.
Thank you, Mr. Keever. Any comments or questions on that retirement of this policy? Okay. All right. I'm not hearing any. Before I forget, for the board, are we happy with adding these 10 policies to our consent agenda in our January meeting?
Yes.
All right, we will do that. Thank you, Mr. Keever, for joining us this evening and providing some context to the discussion in the policy committee, and to our policy committee members, Ms. Hummel and Ms. Young, for your always diligent work. 10 policies, I feel like that's kind of our average in our meetings, 8 to 10 policies that we get to hear and review. I'm curious, at the end of this year now, curious how caught up we might be.
Ms. Aller's just looking at that recently, and we'll provide that information to the board.
Yeah, right. I genuinely would like to know, because I know we've asked a lot of our policy committee and Dr. Herron, your staff, to respond to something that we had kind of not realized we needed to be addressing policies every 5 years. And so I really appreciate the work that everybody's put into that to make sure that we are above board with our own responsibilities. So thank you.
Mr. Adal, if I could in particular thank Mr. Keever for his leadership in this area, and all of the other department heads and senior staff who've done the work behind the scenes. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you all. And happy holidays and Merry Christmas, Mr. Keever. Hope you have a good one. All right, we're going to move on to our action items for the evening. If I can have a motion to approve the personnel actions presented this evening.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve personnel actions as presented.
I second.
Thank you, Ms. Hummel, and thank you, Ms. Hundley, for the second. Ms. Aller?
Ms. Hummel.
Which one, me?
Yes, sorry. Ms.
Aye.
Hummel.
I thought you said Hundley, sorry.
It's okay.
Aye.
Mrs. Hundley.
Aye.
Mrs. Ortego.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Ms. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
Aye. Item 2, if I can have a motion to approve a deadline extension for appeal personnel investigation case number 2022-2023-01.
I move that the school board extend the deadline by which to consider and issue a decision on an appeal of a personnel investigation, case number 2023-01 to January 30, 2023.
Thank you, Dr. Beers. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Ms. Hundley. Any discussion on why we're having to do this evening? We did mention it earlier. We're clear? Okay. Won't belabor the point. Ms. Aller?
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Ms. Cook.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley. Mrs. Ortego.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
Aye. So it's a little different on my sheet here. So item 8.3, approval of minutes from November 15th, 2022 meeting. Can I have a motion for that?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve minutes from the meeting on 11/15/22.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Any discussion?
I'd just like to thank Ms. Aller for the way she named the first public speaker. I thought that was clever.
Thank you.
I think that was Mr. Kelly. Is that right? Yeah. All right, Ms. Aller?
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Ms. Cook.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
Mrs. Ortego.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
Aye. All right, item 8.4, approval of the fiscal year 24 through 33 superintendent's proposed capital improvement plan. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, oh, go ahead. I move that we approve the FY 24 through 33 superintendent's proposed capital improvement plan as presented.
I second.
Thank you, Ms. Ortego and Ms. Hunley for the second. Discussion on this agenda item.
Let's do it.
Ms. Cook, begin with you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't repeat myself from last meeting as I did speak at length about this, but I wanted to talk a little bit about pre-K and then the CIP in general. But so as far as pre-K and programming, I still remain concerned about adding 160 additional pre-K seats without a community conversation. I worry about the impact on our budget, particularly the opportunity costs associated with that, even though I believe that the services are critical. I want to be clear about that. And I also am curious about the impact on other local providers by adding so many seats. I just don't think that conversation has been had at the community level, and I think it needs to happen. And then regarding transportation, I fielded a question yesterday, so I just wanted to toss that to Dr. Herron. Right now we have pre-K in several sites, and we're going to be consolidating to 2 sites. So someone asked me if that meant that our little kiddos would be on the bus longer because of that. So I was just curious if you could.
Yes, we certainly have pre-K at 4 different sites right now. Traditionally, we've had it at 3, but added a 4th in the last 2 years. It could well mean a longer transportation for some of our students, not for all, but for those who are further out from the 2 sites. The 2 sites will be centrally located to the north and to the south of the division to minimize that extra transportation that will likely be
And are you ready to say which sites, because it's not in the CIP, and so are you, it's been mentioned from the dais, but I fielded a couple questions about that too. So would you?
Sure. The sites are going to be Clarabird Baker and Norge.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's what I thought. And then also, I wanted to just make a comment about the redistricting that's going to be required when these facilities open. And the division has recently started to change the way it allocates its resources depending on the needs of the students, and evidence of that would be the smaller class size at James River. That shift in how WJCC operates allows us the opportunity to think differently about redistricting by putting transportation and proximity at the elementary level as a high priority, given our difficulty with drivers and start times. And so I just want to put that on the record that if we can consolidate our attendance zones by proximity and then allocate resources commensurate with class size reduction at higher poverty schools, we can realize some efficiencies that I think could help our transportation policy. So I just wanted to put that out there and hope that you consider doing that. But we have to do both. If the school division is going to adjust attendance zones that way, then allocations have to be allocated appropriately. But as I said at the last meeting, I'm not going to support the CIP recommendation. I appreciate it very much, and I know a lot of hard work went into it.
And my no vote is not in any way, shape, or form a reflection on my opinion about the quality of the recommendation. I want to be clear about it. Nor does it suggest I don't think we need more educational space. We do, based on past growth alone. But it's just a reflection on my belief about how tax dollars are best spent and what the role of the school board is. I've already expressed my concerns, writ large, so I won't repeat them as I said earlier. But I think this administration and the school board believes that we need a new elementary school, and we're only asking for pre-K space because we've been informed we won't get anything else. And I'm very grateful for James City County's transparency around that issue. It's the clarity is truly helpful, so I do appreciate it. But I think I'm in this chair to advocate for kids and for teachers and for families, and the kids and the teachers need 750 seats, which is a school. And to me, it's just that simple. And I think that's what they need to hear from this board. We vote twice on this budget. The first time is a request, and the second time is to approve the final budget. So at this point in the process, at the request point in time, my vote is no. So I just wanted to explain that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Comments from any other members before we take action? Okay, Ms. Aller?
Mrs. Ortega.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Ms. Cook.
No.
Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley. Mr. Dowell.
Aye. Thank you. And if I can have a motion for item 8.5, approval of revisions to policy IIA, instructional materials.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the revisions to policy IIA, instructional materials, as presented.
Thank you, Dr. Beers. Is there a second? Thank you, Ms. Hunley, for the second. Any discussion? Well, I do appreciate that we were able to take a second look around on this policy, the patience that everybody showed with this, and that we were able to come to a consensus on this. Ms. Aller?
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Ms. Cook.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
Mrs. Ortega.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
Aye. Item 8.6, approval of revisions to policy IIAB, supplemental materials, selection and adoption. Is there a
Mr.
motion?
Chair, I move to approve the revisions of policy IIAB, supplementary material selection and adoption as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Hundley. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Beers. Any discussion on IIAB? Okay, Ms. Aller?
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
Mrs. Ortega.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Ms. Cook.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel. Mr. Dowell.
Aye. And our final action item 8.7, approval of award of contract for door locking system upgrades to Architectural Products of Virginia for $606,669. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve award of contract for door locking system upgrades to Architectural Products of Virginia for $606,669.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Beers. Any discussion? All right, Ms. Aller?
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Ms. Cook.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
Mrs. Ortega.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
Aye. All right, thank you, everyone. We're going to move on to item 9, our board matters, board member comments. Before we go around the horn, if I can ask Ms. Cook to join me at the podium so that you or anybody else that wants to laud your praises can be heard as we dote on you some gifts. Please join me. This is Miss Cook's The Jefferson Cup. They made me do it. Right. It says, Kara A. Cook, WJCC School Board, January 1st, 2015 to December 31st, 2022. And we have more for you. I'm going to ask just in a moment, Dr. Beers and Ms. Cook and, Ms. Young and Ms. Hummel to come up to present another gift. But Ms. Cook was my board mentor 3 years ago. Flew by quick, and I've learned so much from you. And I'm going to keep it brief because you all know I can get emotional. But I think reflecting on you and what you've meant to this division, what you've meant to me. Kind of like the mustard seed in the parable, the mustard seed. With you, passion, a little bit of passion can do a lot. And you've got a ton of passion for children and families and the impact that you've had on this division. We won't know just yet, but we will see it in futures to come with children out there serving their community. It's going to be a reflection on your work. So thank you. Yeah, great job. We can have Dr. Hayes and Ms. Young.
I have to say that I first knew Kira as a potter. In fact, I have played with the mud myself, not nearly as successfully as she has, but she's an artist as well, and I know that I hope that she returns to that, and I hope I get a chance to pick up some ideas from you as well.
Dueling wheels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The wheel's the toughest thing for me. But
Oh,
yeah.
do it.
Oh, okay. Thanks for your service.
Well, I don't pot. Is that the right word?
No.
That didn't come out right.
I'm not a potter.
We'll edit that out.
Let's delete that. Sorry, I don't know if I can say anything after that. But one of the things that potters do is mold. And I think that Kira has spent a good portion of her time here on the board molding us.
Moldy.
No, I'm not. You can say I'm moldy, but you're not. But molding this board into a board that's more thoughtful, and I appreciate that.
Okay, my turn. Kira, this is a gift for you from everyone on this board, and it is a clock. And in that clock, it's engraved, "Madam, your time is up." With your name and WJCC's Williamsburg School Rep, and then the years of your service. So anyway, I just wanted everyone just appreciates you so much. And usually I extemporaneously talk, but I actually wrote something this time, so I am going to read it. So, Kira Cook was my assigned mentor when I first came on the board 7 years ago. At that time, we had 4 new school board members. In retrospect, although she only had 1 year of experience on the board, it felt from our perspective that she'd been here forever. There is no one, hands down, that knows more about the arcane acronyms that school boards need to be informed about than Kira Cook. Ask her about any of these, and she'll not only know what they stand for, but she'll know the entire history behind them and their impact on our systems. And I'm saying FOIA, SPED, ESL, LEP, ED, IDEA, ESSER, ESLs, LCI, CIP, SOQs, SQIs, not to mention Titles I, Part A and B, Title II, Part A, Title IV, and the CARES Act, and VPI, the Virginia Preschool Initiative. And now, GASB and FASB. And let's not forget her knowledge of parliamentary procedure, especially as it relates to closed session topics. She literally personifies Robert's Rules of Order. Kira has been the watchdog of every single closed session school board meeting to ensure that we never, ever veer off topic.
And we thank you.
She is like the proverbial teacher's pet who exemplifies integrity even when no one is watching or listening. She served as the chair of the school board several years ago, which perfected her knowledge of parliamentary procedure, and since then she is the go-to person for all subsequent chairs for advice on how to run efficient meetings. And finally, there's no one who knows more about our convoluted joint school system than Kira. She understands the partnership between the county and the city, including the role that each plays in funding our operating and CIP budget. She actually reads our financial reports, and she asks probing questions about the details that the rest of us might otherwise overlook. She has been a passionate supporter of our localities and their efforts to prioritize their funding despite a sometimes less than optimal funding situation at the state level, of which she reminds us constantly. So Kira, we will miss your attention to detail, your strong convictions, your ethical behavior, and your constant advocacy for all students, teachers, and staffs in our system. You have set a strong example for the rest of us to follow, and thank you for your service these past 8 years.
My remarks are over there.
We're going to let you go last.
Okay.
We're going to let you go last. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you all very much. This is humbling.
So I asked Dr. Beers and Ms. Young and Ms. Hummel to join Ms. Cook at the podium because they actually came on together, 8 years ago. So I just thought that was fitting. If we can go with Ms. Hunley, and then we'll continue with Ms. Young with board member, or to go with board member comments.
So I'm going to go on record to say Julie is my mentor, but Kira's my step mentor. And I have called her on numerous occasions. And although I don't feel like I've learned all that I could from her, I stand in awe of her and her words. And I remember when I saw her budget book with all the sticky notes, I was like, oh, Lord, am I supposed to have all those sticky notes? But I think about the movie Batman. When I think of her, and I don't know if y'all remember this scene where Joker thought he had the girl, and then Batman swoops in, and he has this gadget, and then he swoops her out of the way, and then Joker says, where does he get those magnificent toys? And that's what I think about when she swoops in with things. I just go, wow, where did that come from? Anyway, but thank you so much. Secondly, there's lots of concerts and winter things going on, and I know I was thinking I was going to make it to one tonight, but that's not going to happen. But and a lot of them are on the same night. So just good luck to all the kids that have prepared, for the season. And speaking of the season, just want to wish everybody happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, and Happy New Year. Till we see you again in January.
Thank you, Ms. Huntley. Ms. Ortega.
Well, I will start by also thanking Ms. Cook. She is has been my chosen mentor this past year, which I don't know about you, Kim, but I cannot believe it's been a whole year already. It went by way too fast, but I have certainly benefited a lot from all of her time, her advice. We don't necessarily agree on everything. We don't disagree on everything, but she has always been genuine and honest, always said she would explain exactly how to go about things, how things work. I've always trusted her, and will continue. She's a combination of a high-level strategic thinker and extremely detail-oriented, which is a somewhat unique combination, but highly effective. I have something I aspire to be. And I thank you for all your time and your example, and your passion for education, for the children, for the community. It's absolutely genuine, and it's heartfelt, and it has moved, as Mr. Dowell said, it has moved a lot, and we'll see the fruits of that for years to come. But also your commitment to ensuring that everyone that comes after you also is successful, because you know that that's best for the board and for our school division and for our community. So thank you for all of your genuine help. Other than that, also happy holidays to everyone. Whatever you celebrate in whatever way, I hope it's wonderful and meaningful and shared with family, and we'll see you in the new year.
Thank you, Ms. Ortega. Are there, before we give Ms. Cook the last word, are there any other board members that have any other matters to address? Okay. Ms. Cook, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, all of you, for your kind remarks. I wanted to just comment, I really enjoyed the joint meeting. I particularly enjoyed the presentation from Jim Regenball and all of his data, which I just, can't get enough of. But I just wanted to comment that the homeless numbers going down, That's probably because so much rent assistance came into the community. So I see Ms. Bourgeois nodding. So I'm just, yeah, that's going to go back up. I just wanted to just sort of say that. Just be ready. That's going to go back up. So I wanted to say a few things, and I appreciate the opportunity. And it was an honor to serve this division for 8 years. Whew, to watch true excellence in the classroom. I've watched you in the classroom. Amazing. Our teachers are phenomenal. And to work with incredible leaders and colleagues like all of you. Everyone is here because they believe in every single child's potential. And they're passionate about education and that. No one here has an agenda, and it's a beautiful thing because that's not the case in a lot of places. And so I'm just so grateful that everybody here believes in every child's potential. And I'm just thankful for everyone in the room, to everyone I've worked with on the board and in the division for your forbearance in incredibly difficult times. I'm also thankful for Williamsburg City Council for putting me in this chair, and for James City County for their incredible support of public education despite, as Ms. Young said, the state's lack of investment, which was made abundantly clear at the joint meeting. And I don't want to take too much time, but I did want to highlight some things about which I'm just really proud to have been a part of over the last 8 years. We have high-achieving students that outperform the state on almost every measure. Our students are among the best. Well, I'm sorry, why are you laughing at me? I'm sorry, did I say something that made you laugh?
No.
Okay, sorry.
The time's almost up, though.
Thank you.
It's on your clock.
Yeah, I've got, yeah. But our students are among the best in the state academically, athletically, the arts. We're just great. We've made progress with salaries for our staff, with local support and local money. We have more work to do, but we're on the right track, and we're keeping our eye on the prize. And so I just love the repetition with which Dr. Herron and her team bring that in front of us every year. We made progress in supporting students' social and emotional needs so they can focus on their learning, as evidenced in getting to the nationally recommended student-to-counselor ratio. That's something that I think is really impressive. We opened a new state-of-the-art middle school that I'd particularly like to thank former Superintendent Dr. Constantino and former County Administrator Mr. Hill for working together boldly and creatively to get James Blair funded when it was critically needed. And finally, when Blair opened, I'm proud to say that we redistricted in a way that achieved educational equity and contiguous attendance zones. It's not a perfect solution, but our middle schools are the most balanced level in terms of free and reduced lunch numbers, and I'm really proud of that. So anyway, I just wanted to thank all of you for your hard work and your commitment and your partnership. This job is not an easy one. You all do it so well, and it's and you make it look easy. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Thank you for saying yes to public service 8 years ago. Something that very few would say yes to, and you've done it admirably.
Yeah,
Thank you. We'll move on to our upcoming events. Student Advisory Committee meeting at War Hill High School Media Center on December 7th at 3 p.m. On December 15th at 8:30, the Policy Committee is meeting. Maybe your last meeting of the year? Okay.
So, right? I hope that's
That
our
one's
last.
confusing to me.
I believe
Okay.
so.
Room 108 here at Central Office. And then upcoming meetings, it's going to get crazy in January. January 5th at 4, our budget work session, followed by the closed session on the same evening at 6 p.m., followed by our organizational meeting and work session and action items on the 5th of January, 6:30 here at Central Office in the Annex. Our budget work session continues on the 17th of January at 4 p.m. here in Central Office, followed by a closed session at 6 and pre-budget public hearing on the 17th as well at 6:30, and that's going to be in the gymnasium at James Blair Middle School. And then our regular meeting to follow that public hearing in the same gymnasium. We've set our consent agenda for our January 5th meeting. And with that, we say, enjoy retirement, Ms. Cook. Meeting's adjourned.